All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to go on a 1,000-year journey deep into the Middle Ages to get to the bottom of one of the most fundamental questions there is. How do we make sense of the world? It's a huge story, all about the evolution of one single, really powerful idea. Okay, let's just jump right in with a super simple question. Look at the word tree. Easy enough. Now picture an actual tree, with leaves and a trunk. How on earth does that little word, that sound you make, connect to that big living thing out there? I mean, it seems so obvious at first, but the more you think about it, you realize it's a really deep puzzle.
And for well over 1,000 years, this wasn't just some random puzzle. The greatest thinkers in Europe had a specific name for it. They called it the problem of the sign, the signum. And this wasn't some boring, dusty academic thing. No, it was a central obsession, a core question in everything from logic to theology.
So where do we start? Well, our story really kicks off in late antiquity, with the guy who basically laid the groundwork for everything that came after, Augustine of Hippo. You could say he planted the seed that was going to grow for the next 1,000 years.
Here's where Augustine's genius really shines. He came up with this single, huge, all-encompassing category for this whole phenomenon. With this one definition, suddenly everything fit together. A word, a gesture, smoke coming from a fire, a footprint in the sand, they were all now part of the same family. They were all signs. Basically, anything you perceive with your senses that makes your mind think of something else. I mean, that was a truly revolutionary idea.
So after coming up with this big idea, he then breaks it down into two main types. On one side, you've got natural signs. These just happen. There's no intention behind them. Smoke doesn't decide to mean fire, right? It just does. But on the other side, you have given signs. These are the signs that we and other living things use on purpose to communicate. And the number one example here? Spoken words, of course.
This whole idea gets formalized a bit later by a philosopher named Boethius, and his model basically dominates thinking for centuries. Here's the key. The spoken word, the sound, it doesn't point directly to the thing in the world. No, it's a three-step dance. The word first signifies a concept in your mind, and then that mental concept refers to the actual thing. So it's always word to thought to thing.
Okay, let's fast forward now, all the way to the 13th century. And we meet this brilliant and, sometimes controversial thinker, Roger Bacon. What Bacon did was take Augustine's simple little seed of an idea and try to grow it into this massive, incredibly detailed system to classify every single sign you could possibly imagine. And right away, we can see the first huge expansion of this whole concept. Just look at his definition compared to Augustine's. Bacon adds this one crucial little bit, or intellect. See, for Augustine, a sign had to be something you perceived with your senses. Bacon says, not necessarily. A thought can be a sign for another thought, and that can all happen entirely inside your head. The universe of the sign is already getting bigger.
And then he just went to town, building out this whole system. He's subdividing natural signs into all these categories, like signs by inference, dawn means the sun is rising, or signs by likeness, like a portrait of someone. He also splits up signs that come from a soul, separating an instinctive sigh of pain from a word you choose to say. I mean, he was really trying to create a complete taxonomy of meaning itself.
But this right here leads to Bacon's most radical idea. As he puts it, a sign is basically useless, void and vain if no one is there to understand it. Think about it. A circle of leaves outside a building is just a pile of leaves, until someone comes along and interprets it as a sign for a tavern. The sign isn't complete without a mind. The interpreter suddenly becomes absolutely essential.
And that focus on the mind, well, that sets the stage for the biggest twist in our entire story. After Bacon, the very center of gravity of this idea starts to make a massive shift, away from the outside world and deep into the inner world of the mind.
You got to remember, the traditional view, going all the way back, was that the number one sign, the most important one, was the spoken word. That physical sound traveling through the air, that was seen as the real deal, the primary carrier of meaning.
But then, in the 14th century, thinkers like William of Ockham just flipped the whole thing on its head.
They started arguing that no, the spoken word is just a secondary sign. It's subordinate. The primary sign, isn't the sound you hear at all. It's the concept itself, the very thought inside your mind.
Now, this is a little mind-bending, but it's so important. Listen to how this philosopher Peter of Ailey explains it. He says, a concept is a sign, but not because it's like a mental picture that points to your knowledge of a thing. No. The concept is the act of knowing. The sign of the tree in your mind is your knowledge of the tree. The sign and the thought just became the same thing.
And just like that, boom, the whole hierarchy gets inverted. The mental sign is now number one. It's the first and most important sign of all. Spoken words, written words, gestures, none of them could possibly mean anything without a concept in the mind to anchor them. Suddenly, all meaning is ultimately grounded right there, inside the mind.
So, this huge inward turn had an absolutely explosive consequence. Once you crown the mental concept as the king of all signs, what can be a sign suddenly expands to cover, well, pretty much everything. Logic itself basically becomes the science of science.
So what did these late medieval logicians start calling a sign? The list is just astonishing. I mean, of course you have words and letters, but also a wreath outside a tavern, the tolling of a church bell, a crucifix, and get this, one philosopher even said sticks and stones could be signs if you arrange them to represent a logical argument. Incredible!
So how on earth do they justify lumping all this stuff into their logical systems? It was actually a pretty clever trick. They just redefined a key term. The written term no longer just meant letters on a page, it came to mean any sign you perceive with a sense other than hearing. And just like that, a tavern wreath or a hand gesture could be formally treated by a logician as a kind of written sign.
So there you have it. Over 1,000 years, the idea of the sign travels from being a simple thing in the world that points to another thing, all the way to becoming the very act of thinking itself. The medievals located the ultimate source of all meaning squarely in the mind. And you really have to wonder, was that the final answer to this ancient question? Or was it actually the beginning of our own modern questions about consciousness, language, and what it even means to think?